couple of years ago, my friend and I decided to go to the West Virginia High School State Championship football game. And we decided we wanted to watch the game from down on the field. Now, we definitely did not have authorization to get onto the field or into the locker rooms and watch the game, but we figured it couldn't be that hard to get on. It was a high school stadium, so we figured we'd give it a shot. So dressed out in our team colors, we walked right past the security guard in the entrance to the locker room and said hi to him as we walked past, asked him how his day was, and a few seconds later we were inside the locker room, a door away from being out on the field. We were standing there hanging out for a couple of minutes, and not long later, a security guard came up to us, and we thought, oh, great, he's about to kick us out. And instead, what he said was, hey, I have to go out of here for a minute. Do you guys care to guard the door and make sure nobody gets in that shouldn't be? That was hilarious because we were the people that we were supposed to be guarding from getting in. We weren't supposed to be in there in the first place, and we snuck right by and sold ourselves so convincingly that we were asked to guard the door a few minutes later. Now, what is the point of me telling this? Because we looked the part, nobody questioned whether or not we were supposed to be there. Nobody questioned whether or not we were what we said we were, or we were if whether or not we were where we were supposed to be. We acted like we were supposed to be there, and we acted like we belonged, and we said hi to him as we walked in, and so nobody gave it any question. I mean, it's the same thing if I was to go on some power trip and buy a security guard costume and show up at a mall and start bossing people around. If I'm wearing a costume and I look the part, why is anybody going to question whether or not I have any kind of authority? Now, what am I getting at here? Well, I think this directly relates to data visualization in that charts and graphs and tables, especially when they come from a major source, often have an automatic feel of legitimacy to them. Why? Because they look the part. There's no reason when you look at a chart or a graph that's really well designed and has big colors and convincing sounding language, they're just wearing their team colors, so to speak. There's no reason to question at all whether or not it's what it says it is. I mean, somebody could argue and say, look, it's data. You can't argue with statistics. And although that's true, you can't argue with statistics. You can argue over the authenticity or context or interpretation of statistics. I think this is really important when it comes to data visualization, because somebody who either is really bad at data visualization and doesn't know what they're doing, or is lazy and putting it together, or somebody who is maliciously, intentionally trying to put out wrong or deceiving or harmful information, doesn't really have that difficult of a time doing it if they dress it up nicely and they make it look convincing. In the same way that nobody was going to question why we were down in the field when we walked right on, or they aren't going to question why someone in a security uniform is telling them what to do. Nobody's going to question the information on a chart because it looks like a chart. And because of all of this, data visualization has an inherent responsibility to be done correctly and well. Because people automatically grant it legitimacy and they automatically, basically, for the most part, regard what it says is true and is fact and is unarguable, it has to be done. It has a moral, inherent responsibility to be done to the best that it can be. Bad data visualization, whether intentionally or just lazily, is dangerous. How often when skimming an article that you are supposed to read or that you don't want to read the entire thing of, do you just skim until you see big charts or graphs and you try to read the couple of paragraphs around, like before and after the chart, and as well as the chart, just to, or a chapter of a textbook or whatever, just so that you can kind of get the general information of what's going on? They're really easy to look at. They make quick impressions. They tell a story really, really simply and easily to see. If I am behind on a textbook reading and I'm going to class and I have not finished the chapter, I'm just going to read through until I find charts or graphs that give me something to communicate or something that makes sense. They're really easy to follow. I mean, one of the reasons for this is that when you look at a graph or a chart, you can see the changes that are happening. You can actually see proportions and comparisons and changes and trends. So data visualizations, all that to say, data visualizations are really important. And I think it's worth, after looking at everything we've looked at this week and our course content, addressing what makes one good, what makes a good data visualization. I thought a couple different things in this week's course content was especially helpful and interesting. I really found the big web of different kinds of charts helpful, that showed the different times that you would need to use this chart as opposed to this chart. And like, it was a really easy to follow. And I read in this week's articles and lecture notes and all of that that all of the different types of visualizations that are used to show time series, to show rankings, ratios, correlations, deviations. Another thing that I thought was especially interesting, maybe the thing that I found the most interesting from this week, was talking about pie charts, and it came up in a few different readings in our folder, and that pie charts really aren't necessarily that great at being used to convey information, that really they're only the best used when there's an overwhelming larger value, that unless it's like a really, really large majority, 80% of something, for example, like it's not really that good to use a pie chart. So I thought that was really interesting. And to review all of that, I've kind of summed up what I think 3 characteristics, and this isn't necessarily verbatim from any of the readings, but just kind of combines all of that into what I would say are the 3 ingredients to a good data visualization. So number 1 is relevancy. It has to have data. It has to have some kind of information in it that means something, that is relevant, that conveys some kind of point or story or message. A good data visualization is trying to tell you something. The second thing is integrity. And by that, I mean it is done honestly. The data visualization is honest in terms of the data, like the information is not fabricated or made up, like it's true, but also it's non-deceitful. It's not being used to manipulate. A good data visualization doesn't just give accurate information. It doesn't give accurate information with any kind of twist on it. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't try to spin or leave context out. And then the third thing is clarity. So relevancy, integrity, and clarity. By clarity, I mean it's clear to understand what it's trying to say. This is more visually. There's not too much information on it. It's not like overloading you with information and stats. You can kind of get a general feel from a pretty quick glance at what it's trying to get across. It also follows all the like kind of formatting rules in terms of clarity. It has axes that follow all those rules, that you can tell what's going on. They are not so clarity comes in both content, like clear content, and clear presentation. So just a combo of all of this. A good data visualization is a data visualization that has meaningful data that is trying to tell you something, and that uses that data honestly, that uses that relevant information with honesty, and that tells it in a way that is visually appealing, that gets through to you quick, that's easy to follow and understand, especially if you're not well versed in statistics. And so that's kind of a combination of all of that. That's what a good visualization would look like. So on the flip side, then, what makes a bad one? I would say it's any of these qualities that are kind of in reverse to this. It is not relevant or necessary. The information is scattered and weird, and there's not a very clear correlation in what it's trying to get across. Another bad visualization would be dishonest and misleading, whether it's by, like I mentioned, whether it's by fabricating, like intentionally fabricating and trying to make up information that has no basis in fact, or if it's like spinning things that are kind of factually true. And another bad visualization is just something that's visually unclear. You can't really, it's not pleasing to look at. It's unclear what they're trying to get across. The lines are drawn weird. The data is shown weird. And so that's kind of where we're going to go now, is bad visualizations. I want to show a bad visualization and kind of break down what's wrong with it, to get a bigger understanding of data visualizations in general. And luckily for us, this is 2020, and we are at no shortage of bad data visualizations online or on the news. This year has been very chaotic, and so there's tons of different things that people are trying to show data for. And it's also a very polarized political year. That's just the way that we're going, and so everybody's using their data to try to show some kind of message. And so the bad visualization that I've chosen actually relates to, of course, COVID-19. That's kind of been the leading story of the year, and we've seen charts like this all year long, charts that are showing numbers of cases, how many cases exist in a country or the world or a city, or how many deaths there have been, or how many hospitalizations. Like we've seen all these number charts all year long. And so this one is taken from a local Fox affiliate. It's Fox 31 in Denver, Colorado. And this is data from back in late March, early April. So right at the beginning of the coronavirus. And this chart shows, so it's new cases per day. So this is not labeling how many cases there are total in this particular area, but how many new cases are being compounded every single day. So these are not added, like 33 on March 18th. Then there are 61 new ones on March 19th added to these 33. On the surface, this looks like a really good visualization. First of all, the information is correct. Nothing on here, this is factual information. These are the numbers of cases. So it totally checks the box in terms of being real, actual information. None of it is fabricated or lied. The dates at the bottom are really good. It's March 18th, 19th, 20th, all the way up to April 1st. There's just one day at a time. It doesn't skip days, which is really helpful. It shows you every single individual day. And then the y-axis is the number of cases. It's how many new cases there are per day. So on the surface, this looks like a really good visualization. It's in its team colors. It looks like it belongs. It's dressed the part. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you'll see that this is a pretty bad data visualization. Why is that? Well, here's the biggest problem. If you can look closely at the y-axis, and I'm not sure if the camera is able to see it very clearly or not, there's a really inconsistent interval on the y-axis. And so where it starts down here at 30, this is 30 new cases. It goes to 60 to 90, so that's good so far. But then the next jump with the same amount of distance between it goes to 100. So it goes from 30 to 30 to 10. Then it goes from 100 to 150. No, that's 130. Then 160, 190. Then it goes 240. There's a jump of 50. Then another jump of 10 to 250. Then 300. Another jump of 50. Then 50. Then 50. All the way up to 400. The y-axis is completely messed up and warped. That totally changes the shape of the graph. There's no way to really see clearly when that's not growing by the same number what the chart is trying to say. It sends a wrong message about the trends and about the patterns. And these changes, if you look, come in really key places. This jump of 50 happens up here where this big jump right here happens from 174 new cases on March 25th to 344 on March 26th. And that's where some of these 50s come over here. And by doing that, by changing that y interval to 50, it makes that look a lot shorter. It's not nearly as steep of a jump. And to be fair, it does the same thing over here on the drop, the same interval there. And so by doing this and having this messed up, it really changes the shape of this and minimizes the problem. I mean, look, for example, at the difference here. So the scale between 174 and 246. That is a difference of 72, but it makes these numbers look really close. 72 on the original chart, I mean, is a pretty significant number. It's a couple of lines, but then up here, as it starts to change, I mean, they're barely separated at all. They look like they're just about the same number. The new cases have gone down to what they were 3 or 4 days earlier. So this is really misleading. Not to mention, and this isn't even going to really be touched on much. This total cases number here isn't what all of these are added up to. And for whatever reason, they've left some kind of cases out either before the beginning of this data being collected or something. And maybe it was explained, and for the most part, people aren't going to sit here and add these numbers up. But by warping that y-axis, it is shrinking or compressing or just making the trend look incorrect. Why is it like that? I mean, you could speculate and come up with some reasons. The first is just laziness. Maybe it was just done poorly. That was the amount of space they were given, and to make it fit from bottom corner to top corner, those are the intervals they had to use. That's possible, and that's wrong because it does convey a wrong message. And like I said earlier, they have a responsibility to be done well. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily intentional. It was just lazy work that consequently gives off a harmful and wrong message. Another one could just be convenience with numbers. If you look, a lot of the big circles here of the daily numbers, fall pretty closely to these lines. Not really any of them fall like right in between and take up a whole space. So maybe it was just to make that look better. Maybe it was just for convenience. They designed it poorly for the sake of convenience, not thinking that too many statisticians or political scientists were going to watch and care a whole lot. But it also could have been done intentionally. As I said, a lot of these big number crunches come in key places. They come at jumps like this. They come even at increases down here. They come when in ways that shrink how much it's growing. Up here, as it just continually starts to soar and is way higher than the rest of these, it's all 50. So it could be done intentionally, trying to convey some kind of point that this isn't important, that this isn't growing at as fast of a rate as it really is, that it's giving off a wrong message. So I went in and I fixed what I saw to be the errors with it. This is the same exact information, put up basically the exact same way, but with the increasing interval of 30, which is the number that was started as the interval on the original actual chart. And so you can see the shape is generally the same, and we'll look at them side by side in a second. The shape is generally the same, but this growth here, this increase is a lot bigger. It's way more exaggerated, and not exaggerated because it's accurate, but it's way more noticeable. It almost makes, all of this up here from the 26th on look like it's on a whole different level than what was going down on here. Almost like it's exponential, which we'll get to in a second. It even makes 174 to 246. It makes that look a little bit wider of a gap than it did on the last one. And so let's look at these together, one on top of the other. As you can see, they basically follow the exact same shape because it's the same numbers. It's the same information. But on the second one, on mine, the new cases per day is shown to more accurately portray the comparison, the trend. However, I think that both the original and my fixed one are bad visualizations. I think both of them are presenting the information in an incorrect, or not necessarily incorrect, but unhelpful way. I think by showing the new cases per day, this chart is failing to really show how much the virus was spreading back in late May, or late March and early April, because each of these look like, for the most part, linear patterns. You could draw a line of best fit that makes these look like they're linear, and that makes this increase look like it's not happening that quickly, that there's a pretty constant rate that it's increasing. So I actually made a second chart, a third one to go with these. And this one presents the information in the way that I think is the most helpful and is the most responsible, given the seriousness of the virus, the importance of the information being correct as it gets out. And this one is exponential. So this is, what I did in this is added each day's totals onto all the totals of the days before. So this is not new cases per day. This is total COVID cases. And so you see, its numbers are the same. It goes from 34, and then the next jump takes it to 94, to 180, to 262, all the way up to 3,159. This tells the story the best. At no point is there a dip like there were in the other ones, where it looks like it's getting better or going down for a couple of days. It's constantly increasing here, because maybe even though there's a little bit less new cases than new cases the day before, the cases are still piling onto each other over this couple of weeks of a period. And so I think that as we look at the importance of data visualizations, this example is the best way to present the data. Again, up here, there's a consistent y-axis, 500, which, first of all, shows the difference in scale. And so to kind of start bringing to a close, I want to put the original chart from Fox 31 on Denver onto the graph here. That goes, I'm going to start at the same place, and it's going to end at about 300 that it was. These are, again, the new cases per day, and by doing this, it greatly minimizes the amount of cases and the importance of the virus that really actually exists. Down here is about the 300 point, when really the number is so much higher. It's about 3,200. So this is what I would say an example is of a more accurate and helpful and even aesthetic and clear example, as well as one of the first boxes to check and what a good data visualization is. It's relevant. The new cases per day isn't quite as relevant if you're not looking at the big picture. It's not quite as necessary to know how many new cases existed today as compared to yesterday, unless you can see the big picture that this is how quickly this is growing. Especially when the talk was things like flattening the curve and how there was this giant hump and there was exponential growth. The other graphs don't show that. This does. And so as we talk about data visualization and summarize everything that I watched in the hour lecture or read in the articles this past week, this is what I think shows the best representation of the data. And so I think this is important because, like I said, it shows that data visualizations can deal with like matters of life and death, with really important things. Sometimes it's not just information on things that are preferred, a favorite TV show or ratings of a sports game. It has to do with like statistics deal with life and death, and the way that they're portrayed can have a major impact on well-being and safety and health, which brings back to what I said at the beginning. If I've learned anything from studying data visualizations this week, it's that data visualizations have an inherent responsibility because of their importance to be done well. And doing them well, although it's a little bit complex and there's a lot that goes into that, isn't really that hard. It's telling the story in a correct way. And so that's the way that I would argue data visualizations are best done.